Troy, it's very, very good to finally see you in person. We've spoken on the phone a little bit about your extraordinary Muhammad Ali collection, but to actually see you and to see some of the items you have behind you and certainly some of the items behind me makes this especially exciting for me. So I'm very happy to see you, sir. Appreciate you joining me today.
Glad to be here.
You know, I want to go back to the very beginning in terms of how you began to amass this extraordinary assemblage of Muhammad Ali things, items, trunks, gloves, mouthpieces, robes. Because what I find most extraordinary about all of this is that if I understand things correctly, you were actually a baseball guy. Mickey Mantle, Babe Ruth. Ali wasn't necessarily the very first athlete to be on your collecting radar. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very accurate. When I was a little boy, I loved baseball. I played on my local little league team, and I collected baseball cards. And as the baseball card hobby grew, I became more aware of what was out there. And I started learning about Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle and Ty Cobb and Lou Gehrig. And I wanted to collect those cards. Everybody wanted a Babe Ruth card or a Babe Ruth autograph. I was 18 years old and I started to become aware that you could buy memorabilia from other sources. But I found very, very early on that the stuff I really liked, the Mickey Mantles and the Babe Ruth, they were very expensive. It was already a very mature market with a lot of competition.
Right.
And I just was priced out of the market.
So you then turn to Ali or to boxing or to other figures because you think, well, maybe this is a more affordable way to get some extraordinary keepsakes from athletes who are revered as legends, or was it something a little more accidental than that?
I had attended my first East Coast National in 1988. I drove from Milwaukee to New York, and I went to the show. And I was looking for some Babe Ruth items and some Ty Cobb items. And as I went from dealer to dealer, I was immediately priced out. And I turned the corner and I stumbled across this dealer that had this beautiful display of on-site posters. Like he had a lot of boxing posters. And I looked, and he had the Cleveland Williams poster, which is in this sale. And I looked at it. It was Muhammad Ali. It was colorful. It was cardboard. It was kind of small. I thought I could display it. And I asked him how much it was, and it was at a price that I could afford. And I bought it, and a kind of light bulb went on at that very moment.
When you say a light bulb went on, was it because you loved Ali, because you loved what he stood for? Certainly his legend, had grown to an extraordinary heights and by certainly in my childhood and yours as well. Or was it because it was affordable and because as someone who collected sports memorabilia, it was simply an easy entree into an area in which you had a great passion and interest, but not necessarily at that point a great deal of money?
Yeah, I would not say the passion for Muhammad Ali wasn't there at that day. There was definitely an interest. And I was very aware of Muhammad Ali from the ABC Wide World of Sports. He seemed to be on the commercial reels all the time, and he'd be right alongside the big power lifter guy and that poor guy that rolled down the ski hill as he was tumbling down. I remember
the agony of defeat.
The agony of defeat, exactly. So, and the other thing I was thinking about this today as preparing for this interview. When we were in grade school, we used to have bookmobiles, and bookmobiles would come to our school. Scholastic, exactly. And I remember that I had purchased some Muhammad Ali paperback books, and I was interested in him at the time. So he was on my radar, but he wasn't, I like Babe Ruth more at the time. It was as I collected Muhammad Ali, as I researched Muhammad Ali, I began to appreciate for who he really was, what he stood for, and then I grew to love him.
Well, let's talk about that journey because I'm utterly fascinated by it. Because as someone who knew of Ali, but certainly didn't know about Ali necessarily, when that passion begins to grow, when that flicker turns into a flame, I'm fascinated by what led that. Because it's interesting. I saw the ad that you had placed looking for Ali items. And I assume that comes a little bit later in this process. So walk us through a little bit of that journey in terms of finding something that's affordable and then building one of the most extraordinary Muhammad Ali collections anyone has ever assembled. That's a pretty long journey, I assume.
It took a while. But the story, as you hit on, it was influenced by baseball. So again, 1988, they used to run big hobby shows in Chicago. And one weekend, Mickey Mantle and Muhammad Ali were there at the exact same day. So
Wow.
I'd scraped up, enough money for gas, admission, a baseball to get Mickey Mantle to sign, and I had a pair of Everlast gloves for Muhammad Ali to sign. So I went through the line, and Mickey Mantle was signing for everybody, and here it was Mickey Mantle. I got my ball, I saved up my money. I was going to finally meet Mickey Mantle, and it was my turn to go up to the table, and he kind of looked up and gave me a hey, hello, and he was nice. He signed my ball, but it was nothing. There was no interaction. There was no hello, hey guy, how you doing? And I was just, it had an impact on me at the time. So I get him knocked off, and now it's time to go meet Muhammad Ali. And I was in line with a real good friend of mine from college, and because back then we didn't have camera phones, we had the old-fashioned phones with the film that you had to shoot 24 shots and get them developed. So my buddy was working the camera, and it was my turn to get in line. And I said, hey, champ, would you mind if I got a picture with you? And it was probably one of the first photo ops, that these guys were doing. So, but he let me come behind the table, and he posed with me, and he put up his dukes, and we did this little boxing thing, and he engaged me, and I asked him some questions, and he replied, and there was a spark there. He had given me something that Mickey Mantle didn't, and that was another transformation from my desire to collect sports memorabilia to focus on Muhammad Ali.
It was his personality. It was his accessibility. It was his willingness to actually engage the people who adored him the most, right?
Yes, but I have to tell you the story that was even greater than that. So now it's a few years later go by. I'm still slowly building my collection, and he makes an appearance in Madison, Wisconsin, which is an hour from where I was going to school at UWM. So I take the ride down there. I think I got a couple posters signed, and my collection was just growing. I didn't have a lot of things for him. I didn't have a lot of money, but he was there. So I went through the line. He signed my stuff, and he was nice again. But there was nothing special about that. But because he was Muhammad Ali, I just kind of leaned against the wall and just watched him with the fans and everything. And he was there for a long time. I'd say he was there for probably a good 4 hours, and there was a lot of people in line. But as the day progressed, he kind of started wilting, and he was losing his energy, and I think he even nodded off a few times. And as I'm watching this, I heard the door in the back, it had slammed shut, and somebody had snuck in the back door. And when the door shut, it made a sound. So everybody kind of looked up and looked over in that area, and a little, probably about a 12, 13, 14-year-old African-American kid, he had snuck in the door. Well, the security guard, kind of like a Barney Fife type of guy, he runs across the room, and he kind of grabs this kid, and he's going to kick him out. And when the commotion started, Muhammad Ali kind of perked up. He had seen what was going on. So he stood up off the table, and he motioned for the little boy to come over to him. So the little boy started slowly walking toward the stage, and Ali got up off the stage, and he walked down the stairs, and he was moving real slow. And they met in the center of the room, and he leaned down, and he started asking this boy, "Why are you here to see me today?" And he said, "I live in a foster home here in Madison, and one of my mentors, he's older than me, and he told me all about you and how great of a boxer you were, and that you were the greatest. And that's all I've ever heard. You've been my idol, even though I've never seen you fight. And I just wanted to meet you today." And Muhammad Ali stood up, and he patted the kid on the head. Then he stood up, and he started boxing. He started shadow boxing with him, and he did the rope-a-dope, and he did the Ali shuffle. He did the Ali shuffle, and he was at full energy. And it was like watching him in 1964. And literally 15 minutes before that, he was almost falling asleep. And the desire for him to make that little boy feel important, it energized him. It was like a bolt of lightning came and hit Ali. And I watched him do the Ali shuffle live in this one scenario. And that was the moment, like that lightning bolt gave him the energy. The lightning bolt hit me, and I was fully dedicated to collecting him because I had never seen anything like that. It was so inspirational. It was so special to witness that.
I will say this. I was in a room with him, in fact, sitting a table from him at an event about 30 years ago in Los Angeles. And you couldn't take your eyes off of him. There was an extraordinary magnetic presence about Ali, no matter where you were, even if he was sitting quiet and sitting still, that I found to be remarkable. And I can only imagine what it must have been like for you to spend time with him, to experience him either at the event at the Eastern National, or to the event you just recounted here. It's an extraordinarily heartwarming and touching story. I mean, if there's anybody you're going to collect, I assume at some point you realize that it's going to have to be that guy, that presence, that magnetic charisma, somebody who just was, wherever he was, no matter how old he was, no matter how quiet he was always larger than life.
And that was Muhammad Ali.
Yeah. So let's talk about the building of the collection. After that Cleveland Williams poster, what came after that? And how did you begin to assemble it?
This was, the late 80s, early 90s. So you had to really work hard to get your collection. I'd attend the local sports shows. You'd pick up a piece here or there. But I decided that I was going to try to go to the source. So I took out some classified ads in Louisville for probably a period of a decade. And I take out a half-page ad in the Louisville Courier, some of the other local newspapers, put my phone number in there, kind of did the old-fashioned way. And to my surprise, my phone rang, and people started calling me up. And these people were people from Louisville. They lived in his neighborhood. They all had a story. They met him. They hung out with him. Sometimes they were boyhood friends. And hey, I went to the gym and he gave me his gloves. I went to the gym and he gave me his trunks. Or I saw him this day and he signed an autograph for me. And everybody I met, dozens of people, maybe 100 people, they all had the exact same reaction to him. They all had the same experience. He literally gave the shirt or robe off his back if you would ask him. And so I was able to get all this great stuff right direct from the source.
Was it hard to get people to part with such extraordinary pieces?
In my ad, it was kind of laid out that, wanted to buy, paying cash. So I think that when the people called me, they were looking to sell. So I think at that point they had made up their mind that they wanted to get the cash for whatever they had. So when my phone rang, I found we had a really high percentage of probability of doing a deal.
Is that where the photo over my shoulder came from? It's the 1955, or give or take, the photo from the Gold Gloves. It's I believe the earliest known signed Cassius Clay photograph. Is that where that comes from? Something like that?
No, I'm a little familiar with the provenance on that, but I did not get that direct. But the person that sold it was one of the members on his boxing team, on a Golden Glove team, and he sold it many years later. And I always had my feelers out. So if I heard of something, I tried to grab good stuff when I had the chance.
Do you recall what you managed to assemble out of that Louisville, that decade of looking for things in Louisville?
A lot of training stuff. The fight worn stuff was in Bandini's locker, but a couple pair of robes, some training camp stuff from Deer Lake, the bell. I ended up with the bell from the Columbia gym, a lot of personal photos, and a lot of autographs.
Wow, that's extraordinary. So when do the bigger pieces come into play? Sitting behind me, of course, the red robe from Fraser 1, the unlucky robe, never wore red again after that fight, if I'm not mistaken, after 1971. He was a man who favored a white robe with black type.
Yeah,
so where did these and the prayer cap from the Thrilla in Manila, that's from the Thrilla in Manila, correct?
No, the red robe is for the Fraser 1 fight.
No, the red robe, Fraser 1, the prayer cap.
The prayer cap was gifted to him while he went to a mosque in the Philippines for the Thrilla in Manila.
Right. So when do those far more significant, far more valuable, and far more iconic pieces begin to enter your collection?
As I finished college and started working in my profession, started making a little money, I could buy things that were a little more expensive. And I think it was around 2005, right around 2000, they had what we call it the Bandini Brown locker sale. And Bandini Brown was Ali's hype man, and he was with him from Liston till the end. And he was a guy that was always in the corner and always got him energized for the fight. And Bandini, he was a collector, and he collected the best of the best stuff. After the fights, Bandini would take the gloves, the robe, or the trunks, whatever he could get, and he had it in a storage locker. And after Ali finished boxing, he was let go from the camp, and Bandini kind of fell in hard times, and I believe he became addicted to drugs, and he passed away. And he had this lifetime of stuff he had witnessed in a storage locker. And since he was deceased, the bill went unpaid, and the entire contents of the storage locker was auctioned off. One enterprising individual. He recognized there was some value there. He bought it and he consigned it to another auction house. And they had what we call the Bundini locker sale the second time. And that's where the Ali Frazier robe was, and a lot of the fight worn and training trunks were kept by Bundini.
You know, as you begin to gather these pieces, at what point do you realize that it has grown to the point where it has become a museum-worthy collection? That it has become, and it's been here at Heritage for a while, and I have shown it to many, many friends. You know, they come and they like to swing or like to look at a Babe Ruth bat. They like to see a 52 Mantle rookie in any condition. But once you take them to where the Ali stuff is, that's when their eyes get wide, their jaw drops a little bit, their heart races a little bit, when they realize that they are surrounded by some of the most extraordinary keepsakes from Ali's career. At what point do you realize, oh, this is not just a passion, this is a pursuit, this is a lifestyle?
Well, since the collection was assembled over a 35-year period, it was literally purchased one piece at a time. And because I was a college student and just starting my first business and becoming a young professional, I didn't have a very nice house. I rented a lot of different places. And so I always kept my stuff in storage. And it was one piece at a time to go in storage, one piece at a time to go in storage. And I did that for the better part of 25 years. And then finally I said, hey, I'm in the position where I want to display this stuff. So I started taking it to the framers, and I had it professionally matted and framed and had it preserved. And I brought the stuff out, and it took a long time to assemble it all because it was mixed in with other things I had accumulated. And I had a spot in my house, a fairly large spot, dedicated, where it was my goal to have the ultimate man cave and have this stuff put on display. And as I was taking the stuff out of the boxes and setting the robes on mannequins and hanging the pictures on the wall, I was running out of room really fast. And I got up the best stuff, and I looked at it, and I said to myself, wow, this isn't going to do the collection justice. And being the kind of guy that I am, if I couldn't do it right, it really bothered me. And I said, this stuff is, and you know, at that point though, then I started realizing the value and the significance of this stuff. And I said, I just can't do this collection justice. This collection, you know, he was the people's champion. This was the people's collection. You know, this stuff needed to go back to the world to let institutions and museums and people that appreciate Muhammad Ali as much as I did have a second chance at this stuff. So it took me probably a year of just straight thinking about it to make up my mind if I was going to finally consign it. But then I thought about it, and I thought Heritage Auctions was the perfect fit for this. And I made the decision. That's why you guys have it now.
You know, I love the idea that the reason it comes back to the public, the people's champion, the fact that this stuff should not be sort of held by one person, is a very noble and interesting idea. And I do, you know, a lot of collectors, myself included, talk about the fact that we are not meant to be the permanent custodians. We are just temporary holders of history. And it sounds to me like that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah, it's like the Muslim prayer cap. I mean, that's a religious artifact. You know, Muhammad Ali was a spiritual leader to millions and millions of people, and to have that artifact locked up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, it just doesn't make sense. You know, that piece, you know, has the potential to be viewed by millions and enjoyed and appreciated by millions, and you know, that's why we're having this auction to try to bridge, you know, the people are going to appreciate it the most.
Right. So let's talk about some of your favorite pieces that you amassed over the years and the pieces that you're parting with. I mean, the posters alone, I certainly have one of my favorites behind me. In fact, I believe an iteration of that will be the cover for your catalog. So what are some of the pieces that you love the most and were the hardest to bring back to the people on behalf of the people's champion?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question because it became a collection. So I love them all. The on-site posters that you just referenced, that was something that I really focused a lot on. You know, there were 61 fights, so it was a set. You know, I kind of went back to my baseball card days. You know, there were 61 pieces to try to collect, but there wasn't an example of each one. And I collected, I believe I have every known example except for Sonny Banks. I was never able to get the Sonny Banks poster. I know there's an example out there, but I don't own that one. But I believe I have every other on-site poster there was. And the reason I like the posters is this kind of crazy thing too, is when I was a kid, I used to go to the mall and they used to have poster shops, and I'd walk in the mall and you'd flip through and you see all the different images. And I just thought that was cool. So posters always kind of stuck with me. And I think that's maybe why I gravitated toward the Cleveland Williams, for my first East Coast National. And it was also, it was a goal. I thought it was an obtainable goal at the time to try to collect those. And they were beautiful. And
Right.
if you look at the printing process and the colors they used, I mean, they're really beautiful. They're works of art. I think they've transcended posters. And I really think they're, pop culture, Americana art nowadays.
Oh, look, the one thing I've always collected are concert posters, especially for more obscure, the hand printed posters and things like that. That's that's sort of one of my main passions in collecting. So I certainly can understand why posters, because they do represent, right, especially the on-site posters like this one. They represent a moment. They were there. They were sort of witnesses to history. People who were there remember seeing them, and they do represent that very specific moment in time.
The crown jewel of my collection was, of course, the red robe that's behind you.
Right.
To have any Muhammad Ali robe is very special. He fought 61 times, so everything is one of 61. Each one is 101 of its own. It was worn for that fight only, but at best you could only have 61 pieces to go from. Michael Jordan played in over 1,200 games, so there was the potential to have 1,200 shirts or a lot bigger population of that. So each of these fight-worn robes, they're very special. And the red one from the Frazier fight, it's iconic at so many levels. You're so used to seeing him in the white robe that when you see the red one with the white lettering, and it's made out of that velour material, it's just very special. It catches your eye. It's a little different than everything else. And, as you know, that's a fight that he lost. And, a lot of boxers, after they lost their first one, they quit, or you didn't hear from them again. But that motivated him more than anything to come back and become champion again. So that robe, even though that's the one he lost, it was the story of the comeback. He's going to beat the adversity. He's going to be better than Frazier the second time. And he did. And, that robe is very significant because it's a symbol of don't quit, don't give up, and overcome even the biggest adversity, such as getting knocked out, by Joe Frazier at Madison Square Garden.
And it's the only Ali robe in that color.
And it's the only one in that color.
That's the thing I think I love most about it. But I do love all of the sort of the inspiration and backstory behind it. And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you about next, which is, as you begin to amass this collection, I assume, or maybe I'm wrong to assume, that you begin to deep dive into his life, into his story, into who he was and what he meant. Because certainly everyone has a very surface idea of who Muhammad Ali was, what he meant to people. You certainly see hundreds of videos of him being surrounded by people speaking as he did, inspiring as he did. One of my favorite books is David Remnick's book on Ali. So do you begin to devour those books? Do you begin to watch all of those interviews and watch all of that newsreel footage, watch his conversations with Howard Cosell? Or is it something beyond that?
No, that's exactly what it was. As everything I collect, the artifact, that's one part of it, but it's the education and certain things. I tend to collect things that motivate me, that inspire me. And again, after the meetings with Muhammad Ali and the phenomenal experience I had, I did begin the research process. I did buy as many hardcover books I could find, out of print books, paperback books, the old Sports Illustrateds. I think he held the record at one time for being on the cover. So there was a lot of information out there. You had to work hard to get it, but going to secondhand bookstores, and every once in a while I'd find a new book on Muhammad Ali I didn't have, and I'd read it from cover to cover and take notes, and I would try to find names of people he had mentioned, and then I would try to reach out to them to see if they had anything. And just the more I read, the more I appreciated it, and I was 100% certain that I'd made the right choice of the guy that I was going to dedicate my collecting efforts to.
It sounds a bit like you were an investigative reporter in some regards, trying to track down those who might have those significant pieces. In fact, what I kind of love most about this collection is that it's not just the most iconic and the most influential and the most famous pieces, or in the case of the Red Robe, the most infamous pieces, but it's I believe there's mouthpieces in here. In fact, I believe there's the one from the Rumble in the Jungle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was the mouth guard that was in his mouth while he fought George Foreman in Africa. I mean, that was there. That was a part of history. As he's talking, he's taunting George Foreman. His words are passing, over that mouth guard. I mean, that was literally, you heard history being created off of that mouth guard.
Well, it's so fascinating to me because one of my favorite pieces in this is the photo of Ali with the police officer who actually inspired him to become a fighter to begin with.
Yes. Yeah, Joe Martin, everybody knows the story. Young Cassius Clay had his bike stolen, and he went to the police station. He said, "Hey, I want to whoop the guy that stole my bike." And Joe Martin was a police officer, and he also taught boxing. He said, "Hey, you got to know how to handle yourself, and if you're gonna do this, you got to do it right. So why don't you come to my my boxing gym?" And he was there the next day and never left for 30 years. And so to have a photograph of Joe Martin, the gentleman that actually introduced him to the sport, which made him the greatest. That's a very, very iconic piece.
I think that's what I love about this, that it tells the life. It's not just, here's a great piece from a great fight. Here's the mouth guard from an important moment. Here's the infamous Red Robe that drove him to become a better fighter, to become the greatest. But it really does. And I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about what it's like to assemble not just a really good or a really great collection, but a collection that actually and accurately tells the life story of Muhammad Ali.
And that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell the story of Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali. So I created the constraints of the collection of, from when he was born until he retired in 1982. I didn't collect anything after his retirement, with the exception of one of the 1996 Olympic torches that was used in the relay. But I wanted to have stuff that encompassed his life. And I didn't collect any limited edition stuff or anything that was mass produced. And it was just, it was because it was the people that was in his entourage. Everybody that I met told a story. If I met somebody that was in his training camp, they had a story. If I met somebody that he had signed an autograph for, they had told a story. The tickets, that was a witness to the fight that told the story. So it was really all about telling stories. And I didn't have any constraints, like baseball cards. There's 792 cards in the set, and they're all numbered. And once you get them, you're done. I thought that his story could be captured and told by all the artifacts. It's sort of like an archaeological dig. You dig 100 feet in the dirt, and you find a piece of metal and a piece of pottery and maybe some textile, and you put that together. These archaeologists, and they say, hey, this guy was lived 150 years ago. He ate apples on Wednesday, and he brushed his teeth with a steer bone. I don't know how these guys do it, but they do it. And by collecting these artifacts of Muhammad Ali, the newspapers, the jump ropes, the axe that he used to train, you got a archaeological type of look into the man, of how he lived his day-to-day life and who he touched and who he influenced.
Had you ever thought about writing a book about assembling this collection?
I did, but it was a lot of work. So I hope the catalog, Heritage has done a great job. We worked really hard putting these stories down with the lot description. So I think the presentation of this memorabilia is going to pretty much capture anything I could have said in a book.
Yeah. The catalog is extraordinary. And again, having walked through this collection a few times over the last year, every time something different grabs my eye or pulls my heart, I can only imagine the stories that you've heard. And I certainly hope that the catalog shares a lot of those stories behind these pieces, because as you say, people were very eager to tell you not just what he meant, but their interactions with him.
So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to kind of surprise people too in the collection. And for example, I'll quiz you. How many names did he go by?
3.
What's the third one?
Cassius X.
Very good. Not a lot of people know that. For a very, very small window, for maybe a 2-week period, he was Cassius X. He was Cassius Clay. He was hanging out with Malcolm X, and he decided he was going to change his name. And the first name that he chose was Cassius X. And in my 35 years of collection, if you want to ask me about the one that got away, really early in my career, I saw one example of a Cassius X autograph. that I did not win, and I've never seen one since. But I do have a PSA Type 1 photo of Cassius X with Malcolm X, and that's a very rare, very special piece.
You know, I'm going to tell you this only because, well, my wife is from Miami, and she would be very happy if I didn't mention the fact that the Fifth Street Gym sign is in here.
Yeah.
How do you get that?
Again, Angelo Dundee had saved it after his brother Chris had died. And as Angelo was getting up there in ages, he decided to let go some of his stuff. He kind of consigned it to an auction. And I saw it, and I said, I had to have that, because so much of his formal training, and definitely all the training that he did to beat Liston in the first fight, was done at the Fifth Street Gym. And, you know, the other cool thing of what I think is a real fascinating sub-story to that is as that sign was hanging above the gym, the Beatles, all four of them, walked under that sign to go in, you know, into the ring. And there's that famous sparring session photo where he's knocking all four of them out. They all passed under that sign to go take that photo op that day. So not only is that a Cassius Clay piece, that's also all four of the Beatles piece.
And truly one of the great pieces of Americana that I have ever seen. You know, it's one of the few pieces that when I walk by it in this entire building, which is loaded with some of the most extraordinary pieces of American history, it's the one piece that when I walk by it, I stop by it, I look at it, I might reach out and touch it a little bit. There is something just extraordinarily magical about that particular piece. What is it like when you can obtain something like that?
It's nice, but it's a lot of collectors echo the sentiment. You find it, you get excited, you research it, you make sure it's authentic, you bid on it, you win it, you write the check, you pay for it. Then it comes to you got it, but guess what? Now you're on to the next piece, and that's kind of how I always was. It's like, what's the next piece I can find? I never took the proper time to enjoy it.
Somebody told me just yesterday that the only problem with auctions is that they can be oftentimes anticlimactic, and that collectors are always on to the next thing. And that, I assume, is in some ways what leads collectors to part with some things, because you've lived with it, you've enjoyed it, you've embraced it, and now it's time for somebody else to have the feeling that you had while pursuing that extraordinary artifact.
Yes, that's right. I'm still a collector at heart. I have new areas of interest. When I quit collecting Muhammad Ali, I put it down. I don't add anything anymore. I've ended the chapter of my life, but I have a lot of other things. I'm still very active in the hobby, and I have other interests that I want to pursue, and I'm just looking forward to the future.
Well, I can't thank you enough, Troy, for doing this. For you to tell me the story of the collection, for us to be able to share with other people this story, this video, and obviously this extraordinary collection is a real honor. When I came to Heritage a couple of years ago, it was because I wanted to be around, to write about, and to talk about, to think about things like this. So I really appreciate this opportunity, and I cannot wait to see how this all goes down in July.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank the entire staff at Heritage Auctions, and we're looking for a great sale.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.